Hey everybody, in this episode, it's myself, Ben, and a dear friend of mine, Jimbo. I have had the honor and privilege to know Jimbo now for the better part of 14 years, and we wanted to bring him on the show to talk about his sobriety journey, and it's pretty fascinating. He grew up in New York, made a transition to Florida, and there's a couple of things in here that we discussed that I think is very important when it comes to people's sobriety journey. Into his sobriety, a pretty substantial amount of time, he got a diagnosis that was rather scary for him, and he talks about how he navigated that throughout his sobriety and really the power of community, the power of prayer, and his relationship with God. Truly fascinating, and he has made a physical change in his life. This man has lost over 100 pounds in his sobriety, and it has really amped up his sobriety, and he's doing absolutely phenomenal. So we wanted to have him come on the show and share his story with you. We know you're going to get a lot out of this episode. Enjoy the show. Ready, Jimbo?
I am ready.
You ready, Benjamin?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Here we are, Real Recovery Talk. I am your host, Tom Conrad. In today's episode, we've got Benjamin B.
What's happening, everyone?
And we also have a gentleman who goes by Jimbo. Jimbo, what's going on?
Hello there.
How are you?
I'm doing well.
First things first, thank you for tuning in on the podcast app, whichever one that you choose to use, and thank you for watching on YouTube. In the end, if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, you can always reach us. info@realrecoverytalk.com. Again, that's info@realrecoverytalk.com. And ultimately, we want to help you turn your mess into your message, right, Ben?
Yes, sir.
Right, Jimbo?
You got it.
Also, go to realrecoverytalk.com. There you're going to see a little thingy on the front that says schedule call. If you click that, you can schedule a call with one of us. It's going to take you to a fancy calendar page. You plug your email in, and you can schedule a call with either myself, Ben, or Dr. Tambini. We'll give you 10 or 15 minutes so you can talk about your situation, see if we can help you in any possible way. Anything else, Ben?
No, covers it.
Yep. Okay. So here we are. It's a lovely Monday morning in West Palm Beach, Florida. It's hot.
Very hot.
It was so hot this weekend, dude. I laid out by the pool and was like dripping sweat before I even got in the pool.
Yeah.
It was like I had already been in.
It's not even, our pool's not even worth going in.
It's like a bath water.
Yeah, it's so hot and just, gross. This time of year sucks here. I mean, I love it in the winter, when we get like the 4 or 5 days when it's cold.
Yeah.
It's nice.
4 or 5 days of winter.
Yeah, it's, I'm always ready for summer to come back.
Yeah, I took a shower at like 5 o'clock and ran to the grocery store. And just doing that, I'm like getting in the car and I'm like already sweating.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, why did I even shower?
When you wake up at 7:30 in the morning and you get hit by that blast of furnace air, you're like, yep, South Florida in August.
Yeah, what's interesting? When I lived up north, I always used my remote start on the car to defrost the cars. Now I use it to air condition the car before we get in. So.
I don't miss that other extreme either, though. Being in Minnesota and like the frigid temperatures, like when you have to get gas and it's like 0 degrees. That's worst.
Yeah, no. I mean, you couldn't pay me enough to move back north. I mean, you could, but it'd have to be a lot.
So while we're complaining about this, I will say it's better than that.
Yeah. Jimbo, you're from up north.
Yeah, I don't miss that at all. I've been down here now. I consider myself a semi-native. I've been down here over 42 years. So
where are you from?
I'm originally from upstate New York.
Okay.
A town called Poughkeepsie, New York. Shout out to all my boys in Poughkeepsie.
Old Poughkeepsie.
Poughkeepsie, New York.
No clue where that's at.
It's about an hour north of the city.
Okay. All right. So let me just share a little bit on Jimbo and how I know Jimbo. I found my way to Florida in September of 2010. Chances are, if you've been listening to this podcast for any length of time, you know by this point that I'm from Pennsylvania originally and came to Florida September 15th. I got a one-way ticket to Jacksonville to Lakeview Health where I did detox and residential. And then in late October, took another flight to West Palm Beach to a sober living house called House of Principles.
Oh, yes. The good old HOP.
Yep. And part of being in this sober living house, you know, I was also in an IOP program, Recovery Associates, that is no longer with us, but it was a very, very good program. And the owner of that program, Jim Rapp.
Jim Rapp. Yep.
Great guy. Really took me under his wing. Ben, this is a long-winded story, so just hang in there, buddy.
I've heard it like 1,000 times. Yeah.
But living in House of Principles, it was very structured. It was everything, like you did what you had to do. And part of this was going to AA meetings. And the AA meeting that everybody at House of Principles went to at this time, this goes back to 2010, was the Good Guys group. And that was really my first introduction to Alcoholics Anonymous, outside of the couple meetings that they took us to in treatment and stuff like that. But like when I actually started to better understand what Alcoholics Anonymous was and how it could impact my life, that I give a tribute to the Good Guys group. And Jimbo was a part of that group. So, you know, I always remember Jimbo as just being one of the guys that literally would help anybody. You know, I remember you distinctly talking to all the newcomers, and I mean, this was a big group at one point in time. I mean, there were probably a point in time where there was 100 people at this meeting.
Easily 100. Sometimes we would have more. With a couple of treatment centers bust in, we would have almost 200 people for a little while.
Yeah.
That was a little too crazy.
Yeah, that's a little much. Pull the mic a little bit closer to you.
Mm-hmm. That meeting is one of those meetings that's been a staple in Palm Beach County forever. Everybody has at least heard of it, and it's got like a legacy that rides along with it.
Yeah. I mean, it really did a profound number for me. And still to this day, like anytime I do share my story, which isn't all that often, that is a part of it. But anyways, that was my introduction to Jimbo and fellow Steeler fans, must say.
Yes.
Yeah. You know, so I always I knew Jimbo as just being one of those guys that would really help everybody and, give everybody a shot. And I think that's what AA is about. It's, you know, listen, my opinion, and we can dig into this a little bit if we want to now or later. I think there's good AA and there's bad AA. Jimbo's a representation of good AA, you know, and you find a Jimbo in your life, then you're going to be okay. So, yeah. So Jimbo, thanks for coming on, dude.
I appreciate it.
Let's just get right into it. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up. We've established you're from New York, but you know, it's organic conversation. We don't have any script or nothing. The whiteboard of knowledge is empty today, so we don't know what direction we're going, but let's just roll with it.
Sure. Free flow. Yeah, I've been sober since, what is my sobriety date? June 2nd, 1997. So I got sober before the turn of the century. And, so I'm an old head. Grew up, born in New York City, but moved to a town about an hour north of New York City, Poughkeepsie. And what a difference an hour makes. I was not a city kid. I was a suburb kid. And growing up, a lot of sports. I was really into all the sports. We had baseball, basketball, football, and I excelled at basketball especially. And so that was my drug for a little while, is getting my name in the paper, just kind of seeing what I could do on the athletic field. I'm around 13 years old. I smoked my first joint and fell in love. You know, some kids at 13 fall in love with young ladies. I fell in love with a leafy substance. Every day from 13 to 32, I think I smoked some sort of marijuana throughout the course of that day. Just every day. That was my first love. Alcohol was, take it or leave it, more like a weekend warrior kind of thing. Had a lot of friends that were big into music live bands and everything. And so we would do the keg parties on the weekends. I always drank alcoholically. From the minute I picked up my first drink, I drank to get as drunk as humanly possible, right from the get-go. I think the first time I drank a bottle of Southern Comfort, puked my guts out, and couldn't wait to do it again. But I drank as much as humanly possible every time. But it wasn't an everyday thing. Alcohol really wasn't that big of a problem. Even I was not one of those that in high school had a bottle in the locker, sneaking, it just was not that big of a deal. Graduated about midway through a class of 500 people. I was probably about 250. So as long as I got my B or C, I was happy. I could have done much more, but I was like, all right, I got my C, I'm good. Moved to West Palm Beach right out of high school. My dad, who had some demons of his own, was a compulsive gambler. And God bless him. He put 23 years in Gamblers Anonymous together before he passed away. But he had to hightail it out of New York because the wrong people were looking for him. And so he moved down here to West Palm Beach. We moved right after I graduated high school. So I've been down here since August of 1982. Moved down here, got a great job at one of the resort hotels in Palm Beach right off the get-go. And if you know the hotel and restaurant business, you know that there's a lot of drug addicts and a lot of alcoholics in it. So I fell in love with my people. I found my people. I also found Fort Lauderdale in the mid-'80s. That was fun for a red-blooded American male. Fell in love with just the whole scene. The cocaine cowboys, were down here in the mid-'80s. I fell into that. I just would follow the crowd, if you will. I was never a leader. I was a follower. And, in doing my steps, I looked at that and I was like, wow, here you want to be this leader, but I was a follower. And it took me to some dark places. It took me to some really dark places. Alcohol, when it first started, and I'm talking about Fort Lauderdale and everything, it was fun. I had a lot of fun with alcohol and drugs until it boomeranged on me, until it got to be where I needed drugs and alcohol. I needed to drink every day. If not, start getting the DTs, start getting the, and I was pretty young. And I remember this was back in early 90s, when you could get in health insurance for relatively, cheap private insurance. And I was working at a restaurant that didn't have insurance, so I had to get private insurance. And the doctor coming by and taking my blood, and then I got denied that insurance because my liver enzymes were like through the roof, just literally through the roof. And so he said, we're denying you because your liver enzymes are too high. So I didn't know what that was, so I knew a liver specialist. So I went to the liver specialist, and he gave me a few small tests, and he said, I could hook you up to 1,000 different things, but he says, do you drink? And I said, yeah, I drink. He says, do you drink a lot? I said, well, what do you consider a lot? And so he says, yeah, your drinking is leading down, so he called it cirrhosis highway. He says, the way you're going, I don't see 40. I was 32 at the time. He says, I don't see 40 in your future, the way you're going. He says, you already have a fatty liver. Your liver enzymes are through the roof. He says, do me a favor. He says, quit drinking for 1 month. Come back to me, see me. The liver is an amazing organ. It regenerates it. It kind of, it filters all that stuff out. You'll be able to get that insurance in 1 month. So I remember saying, okay, doc, I'll do that. knowing in my mind, there's no way I can't quit for 10 minutes, forget 1 month. And I remember making the appointment with the secretary for 1 month, knowing that I'm not coming back, knowing that I can't do this. I remember seeing a 7-Eleven across the street from the liver specialist. Now, here he is, just told me I probably got 8, 9 more years. And he said, cirrhosis of the liver is not fun to watch. He says, it's ugly, it's not super fast, and things shut down. So I remember seeing a 7-Eleven, leaving that liver specialist, going over to the 7-Eleven and getting a 12-pack of beer and drinking one after the other, finishing that and getting another one. So right there, he was telling me that I was dying, and I really didn't care. That's a pretty bad place to be.
I think that's a direct representation of the insanity of it, and I kind of had a similar situation when I was living in Pennsylvania. I went to the heart doctor, and because I was having a lot of anxiety, and come to find out, a lot of it was alcohol-induced, withdrawal, stuff like that. But I had the same conversations, with doctors that like, hey, man, you're drinking way too much, especially at your age, and it not even really having an effect. And so, a lot of times even like family members and stuff, they'll ask Ben and I, they're like, they're dying. Why won't they stop? It's literally killing them. And it's like, well, if it were that easy, then they would just stop, but it's not, and I think that's
Big Book says it. The warning of a doctor becomes operative.
Mm-hmm.
What?
Say that again.
There's basically a part in the Big Book that talks about like the warning of a doctor, and how we ignore that. And I mean, it's just very simple. Like you're saying, we come across those cases all the time where regardless of the consequences, people aren't stopping.
Yeah, you can't scare an addict. You can't scare an addict.
And the crappy thing is like we see cases too where people finally get sober, but they've already done so much shit. There's one case that comes to mind that I won't say his name, but finally gets sober, and he's probably got 5 years now and has literally just been in and out of the hospital nonstop. Liver issues, intestinal issues. Like it's almost like got sober to, I don't know, suffer, if you will. It's sad. You can't reverse that. Damage is done.
Yeah. So that was at 32 years old. And how old were you when you got sober?
32.
Yeah. So you bought the 12-pack. You bought another 12-pack.
Mm-hmm.
When did you get sober? And how? Why?
A little bit after that. My house of cards was basically falling apart.
How so?
Just different things happening that I was patching together my life with duct tape and Band-Aids, and just kind of things were happening that were I just couldn't put on the facade anymore. And it took a trip to New York one time. And I remember going to New York and not having any clue of where I was staying. I just wanted to see some old friends in New York. And I remember going into a friend's parents' house and literally making a sandwich, completely drunk out of my mind, making a sandwich, taking a shower in these people's homes.
They didn't know you were there.
They didn't know I was there. Did not know I was there. Again, making a sandwich, making myself at home, putting the television on, falling asleep, dead drunk on their couch, waking up to Mr. C waking me up, going, "What are you doing in my home?" And me just thinking it's a big joke, disrespecting these people's homes completely. And just not having any, and just thinking it's a big joke. And just walking out. I forgot my 12-pack of beer, so I had to come back and get my 12-pack of beer, but just not caring. And right soon after that, it just was like one thing after another. It was just like, that's it. Then on December 2nd, 1996, I'm sitting in my apartment, drinking one beer after another. Rent had been paid for another month or so I was good. And that's when God spoke to me. That's when I heard the voice of God saying, you've had enough. Now, I had another case of beer in the refrigerator, so I didn't have enough. But God said to me, you've had enough. And I was just like, where's that coming from? I remember just going back into the couch and just crying, like snot bubble crying, I know that was it. That was it. And calling AA and say, I need to get to a meeting. And was in the meeting about 4 hours later. Could have gotten a DUI going to that meeting. Could have got a DUI coming back. But I knew that it was it. And that was it. No more.
So you go into this meeting, so you didn't do treatment or nothing?
No.
And in 96, I mean, treatment was around, but it wasn't like it is today.
No, it's not like today. No. It was pretty wild how, because I was in an alcohol and drug-induced haze for 3-4 months before this. I was literally, if you've ever seen the movie Leaving Las Vegas, Nicolas Cage, I was doing the Nicolas Cage. I was literally drinking myself to death every single day, not caring whether I woke up or not. But I remember being so clear-headed right after hearing that voice in my head. And I remember the next day after, if you're drinking about a case and a half a day like I was, if you try to quit cold turkey, your body says, no, not gonna happen. So the next morning I woke up, I was in complete DTs, shaking like a leaf. And I knew to call Wellington Regional Medical Center. And I called them up, and they got me in. I said, I have no insurance. They said, don't worry about it. Just get down here. We know you sound like you're in a lot of trouble. And I was. And so God was working in a big way then.
Wow. That's crazy. So that was what year?
That was in 1996.
So when you go into AA for the first time, what's going through your mind? You had never been to a meeting before.
Never. Didn't know what AA was. Had no idea what AA was. Thinking it was a bunch
How
of
did
homeless
you even know
people.
to call them?
Just
God. Yeah.
Just being so clear-minded, saying, I need... Now, of course, in all my craziness, I knew that I had a drinking problem. I knew that there was a problem. I didn't really think of anything to alleviate that problem, but I knew to call AA. And, they were like, there's a place called Easy Does It on Forest Hill Boulevard.
Oh, wow.
EDI.
I'll go to Easy Does It.
Okay.
Really often.
And my parents lived right down the road, so here I am trying to be Mr. Efficient. I said, well, I'll go to a meeting and I'll see my parents. And I remember going to my mom's, because my mom's dad was an alcoholic. So she saw her youngest son in the throes of alcoholism. She knew it. And I remember going to my mom's house after the first meeting, and she gave me that hug that only a mother could give. She knew that her son had found home, that her son was going to be okay. And I still, to this day, I get a little emotional when I think of that.
Yeah.
Because, again, just clear thinking. And then clear thinking the next day when I know if I tried to detox in the rooms or detox on my couch, I would have died.
Yeah.
I went to that detox. The doctor was so amazed at the numbers that I was getting with my blood pressure that he was very concerned. He told me afterwards, he says, I've never seen anybody come in there with a number like that. I've seen them wheeled in there. I've seen them wheeled out because of that number. He said, that's why we kept on taking your blood pressure, because we thought the blood pressure thing was broken. That's how high it was. He says, you don't realize how close to death you were.
Yeah.
I was so close to death. And again, I just praise God that he gave me all this clear-cut direction on what to do.
So when you go in, Do you remember like the people that you met and stuff like that when you go into this meeting the first time? Like, I guess what I'm getting at is like, I talk a lot about this on the podcast about the sense of community within AA. And honestly, when you're on your sobriety journey, finding people that have done this, what was that like for you when you go in there?
Well, when I went to my very first meeting, I was still kind of fogged out.
Yeah.
But I do remember a guy by the name of Jack, and he bought me a big book. And I was blown away that this guy would buy me a book. I didn't know what the book was all about, you know. But here was somebody, I was not welcome in a lot of places at the end. A lot of the local bars did not want to see me because either I would fall over or get into a fight or something.
Yeah.
So I was not welcome in a lot of places. And when an old timer well, he wasn't an old timer at that time, but he bought me a big book, and I was just blown away. It was just like, wow, I belong here. These are my people. You know, I'm still kind of fogged out because I was still drunk. But I remember after the fog lifted, after the 4 days of detox, there was a couple of people that came in to, spread the message of AA. There was a couple of young kids, too, from a group, I don't know if it's still Love, Faith, and Life, that used to be around. And I was blown away, first of all, how young these kids were, But they had it going on. And I was just like, yeah, I want some of that, And so after I left the detox, I was on my journey.
Tom said something way earlier when we first started talking. He said there's good AA and bad AA, right? I'm more of the camp there's good AA and then not AA.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what I'm hearing, and I'd like your take on it. I got a million things bouncing around in my head right now because I'll just call it what it is. Mm-hmm. I will nerd out on some Alcoholics Anonymous today. Mm-hmm. But you get a big book. Mm-hmm. This guy buys you a big book, Jack. Then what happens? What do you do with that book?
I take that book. I'm a voracious reader. I love to. Mm-hmm. I've read all the classics. I just love to read. I still do. So I took that book and thinking it was like a book, to read it. Yeah, like a novel. So I took it into detox with me, and I read it from cover to cover. I could relate to some of it, but I didn't really know what they were really kind of talking about because I was just kind of reading it for the first time. Mm-hmm. So it was just like, yeah, I can relate to that, but I didn't know the meaning. I didn't know the deep underlying stuff that I needed to get at yet, and that was part of my journey. But for the longest time, I was just like, I'm going to do this differently. I don't need to get a sponsor. I was also on the marijuana maintenance program for the first 6 months of my so-called sobriety.
Okay.
Because I was going to be like Willie Nelson. I was going to be, I made all the, it was alcohol and the cocaine that was killing me. That marijuana is good, it has some medicinal purposes and everything. So I was fooling myself into thinking that I was sober, even though I was smoking weed.
Thank you for sharing that, because we see a lot of that, and kind of what I'm hearing you insinuate is, like you said, I wasn't going to get a sponsor, but then I'm assuming you ended up doing so way that you presented that.
Yes.
But so, and I'm big on that. Like, we'll have folks that come in here, and I talk about this all the time. We're like, I'll run a group, and we'll talk about 12-step programs, and I'll have a few clients that have been to treatment. We'll just call it what it is, a dozen times. And they're like, oh, 12-step programs don't work. And they're like, I've done it before. And I'm like, oh, really? How many guys did you 12-step and take through the book? Well, none. I didn't get that far. Oh, so you never really did it, is my point. But, like, for you, in that journey you were talking about, what made you decide to get a sponsor? What, how'd you get, you were talking about the meaning of the big book, like you were reading it like a novel, but then something changed. What did that look like? What happened upstairs?
Well, I knew that I was just spinning my wheels, if you will. I knew that for the first, And in a way, it was okay because because I was such a mess mentally that I just needed to kind of cool things. I just needed the ride to be over with because I was getting a little dizzy, The ride was making me dizzy. So I needed to just sit for a while and figure out what this all was about. And I remember seeing the 12 steps on the wall. And again, I was, I didn't have a sponsor at the time, and going to number 9. And he said, I'm going to make amends. I'm going to run out there and I'm going to start knocking on doors and say, hey, sorry, I'm 2.5 days sober. Can
the apology tour.
Apology tour. And there was a lot of doors slammed in my face because they're in a order for a reason. And so I needed to get into this program if I really wanted to get something out of it. And I remember my first sponsor, Harry. Dude, he sponsored half of Palm Beach County.
Harry Hamilton?
No. Everybody thinks it was, everybody thinks like when I say Harry, but I know Harry.
Yeah.
He had such a roster of sponsees, and I was so blown away by his willing to help people that I was like, I got to ask this guy to be my sponsor. He said something in a meeting that literally blew me away. And I was like, that's my sponsor. That's my sponsor. I remember going up to him, and it's like a junior high school dance. You're all nervous and everything, and you're like, do you mind if could you maybe, And he's like, come out with it. He's like, would you sponsor me? And he's like, yeah, sure. And that's when I finally had to, when we were starting to go through the steps, driving to John Prince Park. It's a beautiful spring day, summer day. Looking down in my ashtray, and there were the roaches, and the joints in my ashtray. Going, I got to come clean with this guy. You know what I mean? I gotta tell him what I've been doing. And I had such respect for this guy, and I told him, I said, Harry, I've been smoking weed a little bit here and there for the last 6 months. He said, well, I can't sponsor you if you're going to do that. And I was just crushed. I was just like, why can't you sponsor me? He's like, because you're not being clean and sober. You're putting something into your system that's going to, make you feel differently. So I said, okay, I'll give that up too, And again, then my journey really started taking off. And we went through the steps. He was an old school dude. We went through the steps relatively quick.
Yes, love it.
Yeah, we didn't have this big, long, drawn out where you got to write stuff and everything. We were within a couple of days. We were done with the steps.
Beautiful.
And we had some major meat on those bones. And doing an original 4th step and a 5th step, it's not fun. It's not a fun thing to look at where your life, where alcohol and drugs took you and what you became. But it was a needed piece of surgery to get that stuff out.
I want to clarify something for our listeners because I'm of the same camp. Going through it quickly doesn't mean that it wasn't thorough.
No.
Because you just said there was a lot of meat on the bones.
A lot of meat.
Like, when we do this thing, we really do it. It's not just buzzing through it just because. Like, I'm glad that you said it like that.
Yeah. Well, back in the old days, back in the beginning days, they didn't mess around. They brought you to the upper room, and if you didn't, give yourself to God, doing a 3rd step, you couldn't come down and share in the meetings. You had to give yourself to God. Imagine if that happened today. Forget about it.
Yeah. Tom, thank you for bringing Jimbo on. Like, dude, this is my wheelhouse. I'm loving this. Because, going back to what I said earlier, there's good AA and then there's not AA. And I love hearing it from you. Been sober since 97. So, like, I mean, we weren't born till 84. Us two. And you came down to Florida in 82, you said. But, like, I'm curious from old timers, like, how AA has changed over the years. Because, like, I imagine that you're familiar with Joe and Charlie tapes, the speaker tapes, and they talk about this, like where, in the beginning there was the big book and they mailed it out to people.
Yeah.
Guy in California got it. He 12-stepped somebody. Eventually meetings start. Same thing happened in Texas, Florida, and over the course of time, AA, in particular, any 12-step program became like a fellowship of people that don't drink, and the book got forgotten, the program, the steps, because people got to see the joy of the fellowship.
Yep.
You know, and even chapter 2, there's a solution, and the big book talks about, like, we join this fellowship out of fear. Okay, you threw yourself in it. You said you were kind of foggy and whatnot. But then a little down the road, hanging around long enough, you're like, I got to do these steps. And you didn't want to let Jack, didn't want to let Jack down by not telling him about the roaches.
Oh, no, that was Harry, yeah.
Oh, Harry, I'm sorry, Harry.
Okay.
Yep. Because I see that quite often in today, like, you know, it's having a treatment center, you know, we want our guys going out and getting sponsors, and sometimes they come back and it's like, you were talking about going through the steps quickly. And I hear things like, oh, this guy won't start the steps with me until I have a year. And I'm just like, what in the world is going on here?
Yeah.
Like we owe the newcomers a proper explanation of what Alcoholics Anonymous really is.
Sure.
And there's a lot of guys, you know, unfortunately, that, you know, it's kind of lost its way a little bit.
Yeah.
And you got to find those meetings where the guys are doing the deal.
Yeah.
Have you seen that over the course of time, or am I making it up in my head?
No, for sure. When I first came in, there was old timers, especially the old 4th Street AA. Some of the old timers would know 4th Street. These guys didn't care about your feelings. They cared more about your sobriety than they cared about your feelings. They would basically tell you, you know, you don't really have a lot of understanding of the steps, so I would just kind of be quiet, you know, because you don't know what you're talking about. You're just like puking on the meeting. And they didn't care. They cared about you, but they weren't afraid to hurt your feelings. And you mentioned something earlier, and I've worked in the treatment field for a while. It got a little discouraging when I was in there because there's so many of the new generation that don't think that the 12 steps are going to be the answer to their solution. And a generation, we were talking about this beforehand, a generation is being killed out there by this fentanyl, you know, and it's crazy not giving this 12-step program a fair shot. And that's what I just wanted to do. I wanted to give, I knew I was done. I knew that alcohol and drugs were no longer a thing in my life. I mean, on December 2nd, 1996, the obsession to drink and drug was, well, drink. I was still doing the marijuana. I mean, but to drink was lifted. And that is only by the grace of God. Because if it was up to me, again, there was another 12-pack in the refrigerator. If it was up to me, I'd go get another. That's what I was doing when I heard. But so I just want to, you know, tell the newcomers out there that give yourself the opportunity to come back to life. You know, but I've seen it change over the course, and COVID definitely ripped AA apart. There's so many people that I know that are still sober that don't go to meetings anymore. Don't go to meetings.
Or Zoom meetings. In my opinion, it's my opinion, you could take it or leave it, a Zoom meeting is not the equivalent to going in person.
No.
At all.
No, I think it was really needed at the beginning of COVID when there were a lot of unanswered questions. We didn't know. We were still spraying down boxes, and, you know, we didn't know. We didn't, and so it served a purpose early on. But then, just like maybe like remote working, you just kind of get too relaxed. And you just kind of, it doesn't have that same feel of meeting somebody face to face.
Well, and you don't have to get in a car. You don't have to get dressed even if you don't want to.
Exactly.
You know, you can, there's literally zero accountability.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that AA offers on top of the community aspect of it. Inside the community, there's accountability. And that's a lot of times what people need. They need accountability. And I'll tell you this, when I was a part of the Good Guys group, I was accountable to a lot of those guys. And they talked me off of a lot of cliffs. and cliffs that I didn't even know I was getting ready to jump off of. I remember, and tell me if you remember this. We were at one of the Tuesday night or Thursday night or whatever, and Steelers were going into the playoffs. And this was the year that they played Green Bay in the Super Bowl.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
What year was that? Had to have been 2011.
I'm thinking.
I don't know. They lost.
They lost, yeah. We don't want to talk about that.
Yeah, but I wanted to go to Pittsburgh to go to one of the games or something. Mm-hmm. And I had made this announcement like in the meeting, like, hey, just want to let everybody know that I'm going to be out for a week. I'm going to go up to Pittsburgh to, go hang with the guys, and, Steelers are they're going to the Super Bowl. I want to be a part of this, right?
Yeah.
Man, I'll tell you, I got bum rushed with people, telling me that is a terrible idea. Mm-hmm. And, me not knowing I didn't know what I didn't know. I'm like, no, listen, you don't understand. Like, yeah, I'll be fine.
I got this.
Long story short, I didn't end up going. And, now I look at it and I'm like, whew, accountability.
Yeah. Sure.
People, really speaking into my life when I needed it. And, so that was very important. I do want to transition though. You had a pretty significant scare in your sobriety.
Yes.
Let's get into that. I'll let you kind of go into that. Ben, I don't think you know what we're about to talk about, but go ahead, Jimbo.
Okay, so I'm doing the deal. I'm sober. The problem with me sometimes is I sometimes have like spiritual ADD. I'll be going good and then just like see a butterfly, and then I'm like, ooh, and I'll follow that butterfly or shiny things, new car, new condo, new this, new that. And so I got kind of waylaid. I got kind of distracted while I was in AA, and I took a little siesta. I still stayed sober, but I was just putting together a couple of years, and so knew I needed to get back. The guy that was at the very first meeting, who just 4 years ago passed away, Dr. B, Adam B. and Keeney, force of nature, amazing man. He was a doctor, and he would come. I was working security at a place called Old Port Cove in North Palm Beach, and he would come in, and he had that beautiful grin that he had. And he's like, "There's amazing things happen to the good guys. You haven't been there for a couple of years. We would love to have you back." And I was not going to meetings at the time, so I was just like, whatever, But he kept on showing up. He kept on driving up to the gatehouse, and I was like, oh, here comes Adam again. He's going to ask me to go to good guys,
Accountability.
Yeah. And I was doing some things out there, staying sober, that I didn't want a light shine down on, There was things I was doing that wasn't very godly. And so finally, he just wore me down. The guy just wore me down. And he came in one day, and maybe I was doing some things I shouldn't have, and I said, I'm going to go. So I went. And I was plugged back into the good guys, and which was really cool because there was a lot of people like yourself. This is when the HOP came on. And so I dove in. I mean, I just dove in. I had like 12 sponsees at one time. I don't know how I did it with all my time, but I did it. And a lot of these guys are still sober today. So I'm about 14 years sober. I'm right in the middle of AA again, just doing the thing. Had a little bit of pain in my side. I was continuing to have a little bit of pain in my side. Didn't really think anything of it. So went to the doctor. Doctor took some blood tests. Said, we're not liking what we see with the blood test. He says, we're going to give you a colonoscopy. Yeah, okay. So they gave me a colonoscopy, and I had a grapefruit-sized tumor in my colon. I had stage 4 colon cancer, 14 years sober. And I remember the night that I was diagnosed, I went to a meeting, and I raised my hand, and I said, guys, I just got the diagnosis today that it's stage 4 colon cancer. And let me tell you, that's when the fellowship of AA really became a thing. Because right at the end of that meeting, we prayed. And we prayed. and we prayed. And so I went through the chemotherapy, they were thinking about doing some radiation because this tumor was pretty massive. I have a picture of it, like a before and after picture. It's pretty cool. I say that's my miracle. That's a picture of my miracle. So doctors were just hoping that they could shrink it because they went to go there and take it out, and it was just too big. And so they were like, if we were to take it out now, we would have to take out some major plumbing. And so we're just going to try to hit it with chemotherapy, therapy. Hopefully it'll shrink, and then we can take it out. So doing my due. Never once got sick, doing a lot of chemotherapy. Never lost my beautiful locks. That was the least of my concern. I just didn't want to be sick all the time. Never got sick. Just soared through a lot of rounds of chemotherapy. And doctors then gave me a colonoscopy, and they were in absolute amazement that not only did the tumor shrink, it was no longer there. The tumor had disappeared, gone completely. Now, there were some underlying cancer levels that they couldn't see with the cameras and everything. That kind of came up 2 more times on the liver. But for that original diagnosis, the doctors, my oncologist still calls me the miracle patient because he's like, I've been doing this for 20 years. I've never seen somebody with a tumor that size be completely healed. And I truly believe that it was the grace of God that and the power of prayer. 2 years before being diagnosed, I had the absolute blessing and honor to go to Israel and met some rabbis while I was there. They said that there was 10,000 rabbis praying for me when they found out that I got diagnosed. I was on the prayer chain of every Christ Fellowship church, so that's hundreds of thousands of people, plus 10,000 rabbis. So I'm a big proponent of the power of prayer. So it was a miracle. It truly was a miracle.
What year was that?
That was I was diagnosed January 2nd, January 3rd of 2012.
Yeah.
God uses alcoholics, and he wanted you here.
Yeah. Yes, he did, in a big way. And, I was blessed because this guy, Adam, who wore me down and got me back to good guys, became my sponsor. He was at the very first meeting that I was at the Easy Does It Club. And he remembered, he always used to say, thank God you didn't smoke at your first meeting because you would have been like a flamethrower because you would have smoked that cigarette and it would have been, there was so much alcohol. But he became my sponsor. And he was a doctor. He was an anesthesiologist. He was God has an amazing way of working that he put a doctor in my path. And then I had to go down this road. So he was basically telling me what I was going to go down next.
Do you look at that whole time period of your life as like just with gratitude?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just unbelievable. It really blows my mind how much gratitude I have because of that. Because now I've been able to help quite a few. In fact, I'm helping one of my buddies in New York who instant messaged me on Facebook and said, hey, I just got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer.
Yeah.
And I watched your inspirational walk and I need your help. So,
we had a client come in here, 6 months ago now. He came to us from detox and was coughing a lot. And I mean, long story short, he ended up going to Gardens Medical and stuff and ended up getting a stage 4 lung cancer diagnosis. And but fast forward to today, I did just talk to Hannah about him not long ago, last week, and I think he's doing much better. Young guy, 26 years old. But you know what? In specifics to him, I was there the day he got the diagnosis and he was shaking. I mean, visibly shaking. And I'm like, I felt extreme because I'm like, I don't even know what to say.
Yeah.
What do you say to something like that? And the whole community rallied around him. Everybody, helped, and he it was miraculous, like what his response was. Kind of after the dust settles and, you know, it becomes more real. He comes, I would check in with him. I'm like, how you doing? And he's like, I'm good. He's like, he's like, because he could have left treatment. He could have went and started smoking pot and doing all the things. And I would have said, I'm not surprised, you know, hey man, like, but he didn't do that. And he told me, and he stayed in treatment for, you know, his whole time. And he was like, my fentanyl addiction will kill me before this cancer will. And I'm like, wow, you know, and, you know, proud to say, I think now he's doing better. I don't have a official report on him, but you know, it's just, again, what sobriety can do, you know, for people. And, you know, the power of God, the power of prayer, the power of community, and the people that we surround ourselves with, and what it can really do. Ben, you have anything before I transition? There's one other thing I want to talk about.
No, you covered the stuff I wanted to
I just wanted to let it be known that, you know, stage 4 is not a death sentence.
Yeah.
Stage 4, with the advances of chemotherapy, like 50, 60 years ago, the people that got cancer were like the guinea pigs. They were like, all right, we're going to throw this chemotherapy at this. We're going to throw this chemotherapy at that. See if it works. They have perfected a lot. Like, they gave me a cocktail, a 3 different chemo cocktail that they found was very responsive to a lot of people that had colon cancer. You know?
I'll say this. I did have one experience where I think I had about 3 years of sobriety. I was working for Unity at the time, right there on Hummingbird.
Yeah.
And you know the Unitarian Church there on North Lake and Prosperity? There was an AA meeting there for a long time, and we used to take our clients. There was a noon meeting, and I'll never forget this. You know, we bring the van, a bunch of people in early recovery, and there was a gentleman that, you know, came in a wheelchair. He says, I just got the diagnosis, I got a week to live. And I remember him being in this meeting and saying, he was an older guy, you know, lived a good life, it sounded like. And he was like, I just want to let all you newcomers know that I'd rather be nowhere else in the world than amongst you all in this meeting right
powerful.
now. And the whole room was like in tears, you know, but to hear that message, you know, because the guy was so grateful for the life that AA and God gave him, that's how he wanted to go out. It's like, it's wild, man. People don't understand the gravity and the weight of what comes with sobriety and being a part of a fellowship like Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, whatever program you're in. You know, we refer to it as a superpower. You know, like, look at our lives and what we've overcome and the people we have in our lives today.
Yeah.
I'm glad I'm not a normie.
Yeah.
That would suck.
Yeah. Yep. I love how you said that, because when I was first diagnosed, there was a pastor, and I'm bad with names. There was a pastor at Christ Fellowship, Royal Palm Beach, that was going through the same thing.
Jonathan Bonar.
Okay, yes. And I met with him early on. There was a lot of still unanswered questions in my head. And so I met with him. Bill Peavy, hooked it up where I could meet with this guy.
Yeah.
And we were talking in his office. And he said, you know what? He says, I'm a pastor, and I have God and everything. But you have the 12 steps. You have the fellowship. That's something I don't have. You can bring it to your meeting. I can bring it to my God, and you're bringing it to your God as well. But you can also bring it to your fellowship.
Wow.
And he says, I don't have that. He says, I wish I had that. Because, a problem, is halved, once you talk about it.
Right.
And again, with the 2 more diagnoses, I was diagnosed back right after that with liver cancer. It had cropped up again, and I knew exactly what I needed to do. I knew exactly who I needed to talk to. I knew exactly what I needed to do. Came back again, a 3rd time, So now I'm talking to God, and I said the 2nd time, I'm like, God, you're good. 3rd time, I'm like, why, God? why do you keep doing this? Why? And I heard the answer. He says, why not you? I've taken you down this road a couple more times, a couple of times. So why can't you continue to be the messenger for my grace and my glory?
Wow.
Tom,
how long ago was that?
When your cameras died.
Oh, sorry about that. The camera overheated. I hate that thing. I don't understand.
Maybe because I was talking so much fire.
Oh, maybe.
That is it.
Maybe. No, let's, for the sake of time, I do want to transition to this because I do think it needs some attention. Jimbo, you lost a lot of weight, my friend.
Yes.
Oh, pull the mic up close.
There we go.
Good. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So when was this and what prompted all this?
There was a time there that I was tipping the scales close to 300 pounds. I weighed myself today. I'm 197.
Wow.
So if I do my math correctly, that's 103 pounds. Just knowing that I needed to, I actually put a lot, believe it or not, I put a lot of weight on while going through the first round of chemotherapy. Yeah. I don't know what that was. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it's normally the opposite.
Usually it's the opposite. People are puking and but I grew my hair out. I became a hippie, grew my hair really long and put on a lot of weight. And they were like, "Are you sure you're going through chemotherapy?" I mean, it's ridiculous. It's crazy. But I was just getting into that, just a lazy mode, Should I walk 2 miles or order a pizza? Order a pizza, So I just, the pounds just packed on.
What made you finally like, all right, this is getting a little out of hand?
I was having some other health issues, some kidney problems, some diabetes. I got diabetes, and just general fatigue, and just kind of going, I've overcome a lot in my life. I don't want to eat myself to death,
Yeah.
And so I just said, God, me and God, we talk a lot. And I was in the hospital bed at in one of the hospitals, and just going, I need to make some changes in my life. I need to really start, changing my eating habits, changing my exercise habits, and I walk 5 miles a day now, sometimes 7 miles a day.
Good for you.
Just my diabetes is completely under control.
Are you on insulin?
I am. No, I did it. I didn't cheat because I had lost a lot of weight, but I'm also on Ozempic.
Okay.
Yeah. A lot of people are like shamed into, talking about
It's a tool. It's another tool.
Exactly. And it's kept my weight off, and it's helped me with the diabetes.
Now, how long have you been on Ozempic?
About a year.
And did you said you lost a lot of weight before going on that? How much of that 100 did you lose before the Ozempic?
Probably about 50 or 60. Yeah.
What made you decide to do the Ozempic?
The Ozempic, because I was hearing some good things about it, just with the diabetes.
Yep.
So I was like, you know what? Let me see what I can do with this. And the added benefit was 30 more pounds.
Right.
Well, it was originally for diabetes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah. And my insurance, thank God, covers it. I hear some incredible amounts of money that these people are spending to basically lose the weight for it. But I think I've learned some things now where if I were to go off of it, I think I could maintain what I have now. And can I stand to lose 10, maybe 15 more pounds? Probably. And that'll come in time.
Yeah.
But feel great.
I'm glad you recognize that, because Tom brings us up all the time. We'll see people get sober. They're working 12 steps. They're sponsoring guys, but then completely negate their health.
Sure.
And it's, we see it all the time.
Yeah.
People be smoking 3 packs a day, look like their head's going to explode from blood pressure issues, and just Uber Eats all day long.
Sure.
And it's, and that part's kind of hard to watch, man, because right now, I know some really, really good guys in Alcoholics Anonymous that carry such a strong message. And when they're done sharing, they're like gasping for air. And you're like, man, you got to stay around so you can keep helping people.
That's right.
you know?
I think people lose sight of the idea that it's not, it has very little to do with the drugs and the alcohol. I mean, this is what led us here, is the drugs and the alcohol and everything that we put ourselves through. But once that stuff's gone, now it's a lifestyle change.
Yep.
You know, it's no longer about the drugs. It's no longer about the alcohol. It's what can we do in our overarching lifestyle to improve on, you know? And I think a lot of people miss that message, and they're like, oh, as long as I don't drink or drug today, everything's going to be okay. But it's like, yeah, that very well may be true if you want to live this, if you want to continue living this, what I would call mediocre life.
Yes.
And that's, you know, I don't know. It's frustrating.
I see the other end of the spectrum, to be honest with you, too. Like, people come up to me and be like, oh, I want to get in shape like you. How'd you do it? I'm like, well, first I worked 12 steps. You know, that they want to jump to and make the gym their recovery. And I'm like, dude, that's not it either. Like,
but you also worked at it. You worked to get in that good shape. You can't just go to the meeting and think that you're going to be sober. I say you can't get sober by osmosis. You can't sit on your ass and think that all this sobriety is just going to come to you if I'm just going to a meeting, checking off a box.
Yeah.
You can't do it. You just like I can't get in that kind of a shape if I just walk through the gym and if I just hang out at the gym and look at people. I got to hit the weights.
Yeah.
I got to do something to get in that kind of shape. I can't just kind of say, well, I'm going to be in shape, you know, do a couple pull-ups and, you know, it's not going to do. You got to work at it.
Yeah, it's something, you know, Ben, I've been watching this transformation, Ben, let's call it what it is too, is genetically gifted, but you do work very hard at.
I've always worked hard.
You know, it's I've seen a miraculous change, but also with that comes a lot of sacrifice.
Sure.
You know, from Ben's perspective,
Dedication.
like not a lot of people can do the things that he's doing in that regard. But, you know, I think that, you know, people when they decide to get sober, you know, yes, primarily in the beginning, focus on the drink and the drug.
Sure.
And I'm not even going to tell you to stop smoking cigarettes. In fact, I'm going to encourage you to keep smoking because, you know,
I don't want to tackle everything.
Don't tackle everything at one time. But there does come a point in time where, okay, you're no longer craving drugs. You're no longer craving alcohol. The mental obsession has been lifted. Like, you're good. Okay, now let's start these other avenues in our life.
Sure.
Now let's start looking at maybe the pornography or the food issues or the shopping addictions and stuff like that. And a lot of times people are like, nope, I'm good on all that. I don't drink and drug today, so everything's fine.
Well, you just talked about sacrifice, and even the big book says when it comes to sobriety, our sobriety depends on self-sacrifice for others.
Sure.
Like, in some way, shape, or form, we are having to give. We are inconvenienced. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I'm like, oh, crap, I got to go meet with this sponsee.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. On the back end, when I'm done, I'm like, oh, that was so great. Every single time.
Yeah.
But that's just as hard as, like, I don't feel like going to the gym today.
Sure.
And you go anyway. It's literally the same thing.
Yep.
We have to take action is what it comes down to, whether you feel like it or not. And at the end of the day, like, my alcoholism, my addiction is going to kill me if I don't take action.
That's right.
Point blank, period. It might not be today, but if I rest on my laurels, I am done for at some point. It's going to, boom.
And you had mentioned something. You know, do you want top shelf sobriety? Do you want mediocre sobriety, or do you just want sobriety? You know, and I want the top shelf. You know, I want the best that I can possibly do. I can't settle because, again, I can get lazy. I can, you know, put my feet up on the old lazy boy and, you know, just be okay with not drinking and drugging. So, and hiding behind the progress, not perfection. That is something that I've seen, and myself included. Ooh. I just, like, you can hide behind progress. It's progress, not perfection, for years. And you're not progressing, and you're not perfection.
You're nothing. Yeah, you're.
Well, people leave out the keyword spiritual progress.
Exactly.
Not spiritual perfection.
Yes.
So they're not even dropping the right line half the time.
Exactly. Exactly. Again, do you want to half-ass your sobriety? Okay.
Yeah.
Not me.
Yeah,
Just
that's
like
fun.
doing the step work. If you do a half-ass first step, half-ass second step, half-ass third step, guess what? Your sobriety is going to be half-assed. You know, that's the bottom line.
What were you going to say?
I just thought it was funny that he called it top shelf sobriety. I was like thinking of my alcoholism. Like I was a
That's where yeah.
Kettle One, Grey Goose drinker,
Sure.
Belvedere. By the time I'm drinking rubbing alcohol, I'm like,
Oh, exactly.
this ain't looking so cool anymore.
Yeah.
Right? Going from like Heineken to Old Milwaukee, you know?
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
I did look cool. Oh,
It
man.
was, with me, it was more about quantity than quality at the end.
Yeah.
It just was like, I don't want to go to the club because I don't want to spend $6-7 a drink.
I know.
I can get a case of beer for, $9. You know?
Well, you touched on that earlier. I meant to bring this up when you were talking about Fort Lauderdale and all that. Like, and I actually wanted to do an episode on rituals. There's a culture to it because I worked in the restaurant industry here in Palm Beach County, bartending, and there's way more to alcoholism. And you mentioned cocaine cowboys. I did a lot of cocaine down here in South Florida. I had a really hard time staying home and not going out to the scene and partying.
Okay.
Like, but then it does get to the point where I'm like, I can't even afford to go out because I spend so much on alcohol and drugs that like now I'm doing it by myself.
Yeah.
And just the evolution of it, it's scary. It really is because there was some good times.
Sure.
Without a doubt, yeah.
Not going to sit here and say I had a lot of fun early on in drinking. I did. It opened up a whole new world for me. But then that world, slowly but surely, just closes in. And then you're trapped.
Yeah.
And you're trapped. And where do you go from there?
I'd be remiss if I didn't ask. You've lost all this weight and everything. Are you doing any? You walk 7 miles a day, 5 to 7? Are you doing any strength training or anything like that?
I'm not. I need to maybe get with you guys and about kind of.
Let me say this. I meant to comment on this earlier because I have had a change in my thought process. You mentioned walking. What'd you say, 5 to 7 miles a day?
Yeah.
You don't even have to do that much. That's incredible that you do that. Like 5 to 7 miles that's beautiful. I, for a really long time, underrated walking.
Oh yeah.
Until Billy had me walking 15,000 steps a day for the bodybuilding show. And I watched the fat start dropping off. Because I was always like, if I'm not exerting myself.
Yeah, really. Yeah.
And that's the addict mentality I have. Like, if I'm not going all out, it's not working.
Yep.
That's not true. Here I was doing 15,000 steps a day for a couple months, very consistent.
Sure.
And it worked.
It does.
I always want the quick, hard, how do I put as much effort as possible to get there?
Yeah.
Walking, I underrated. And today, like, I just want to say it, like, kudos to anybody that gets out and walks on a daily basis. I need to do more of it.
So Jimbo, here's what we're gonna do. Okay, the walking I totally agree with. It's so many things, especially even the diabetes, like regulates insulin levels and stuff like that.
Yes.
Especially right after you eat. Eat a meal, do 10, 15-minute walk, whatever. But here's what I think we need to do for you is, have you heard, and you know where I'm going with this. Have you heard of Mind Pump? Have you heard of Mind Pump?
No.
Okay, it's #1 downloaded health and fitness podcast in the world. Okay, they've been around a very long time, and they're specific to people like you and I, everyday people that are dabbling in fitness. I'm going to make a suggestion, and I'll send you all the information for them to start consuming their content. But they have programs. Do you have access to a gym?
I can. I don't. Well, yes, I do. Yeah.
Okay, and is it basic? Got basic stuff?
The basic stuff, yeah.
All right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to get you a program from them.
Okay.
It's called Map Starter.
All right.
It's very basic. Ben and I will show you the ropes on it and stuff like that.
Sure.
And then you start incorporating, and it's very non-invasive, basic strength training stuff. Start incorporating that, and I think you're gonna be pleasantly surprised.
Cool.
So we'll get that set up.
Yeah. I do need to maybe up my game a little bit as far as going somewhere else with it as well. Sure.
Yeah. How old are you now?
I'm going to be 60 in August.
Yeah.
August 24th.
Yeah. So got to start incorporating some strength training.
Okay.
So what do you think of that, Ben? Get a map starter?
Yes, sir.
That'll be good. Good for him.
He can't help himself but plug Mind Pump every time.
So we just went on their podcast.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
Ben and I, and the response was amazing.
Cool.
Yeah, so we flew out to California and got to spend some time with them.
Okay.
But you'd be a perfect candidate for them. So, Ben, any final thoughts?
No, I thoroughly I forget the cameras are here and the microphones. Like, we've been doing it forever, and just this conversation, like, I've really enjoyed. Like, sitting down with somebody that I always look back, I feel like I missed out. Like, there was like golden years of AA or something. Like, and I'm like, you know what I mean? And
Sure,
I'm like, I hear
sure.
all these stories from old timers, and I'm like, did I really miss out, or is it just, I don't know. So I love hearing about that stuff.
Yeah. Jimbo, thanks for coming on, man.
Sure.
We'll have to have you on again whenever.
appreciate anytime.
Open invitation. Especially you and Ben. I can literally just leave the room and have you guys nerd out on some AA.
Sure.
So,
Sure.
awesome. All right. Well, that is it for this episode of Real Recovery Talk. Thank you for tuning in. In the end, if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, you can always reach us. info@realrecoverytalk.com. Again, that's info@realrecoverytalk.com. And ultimately, we want to help you turn your mess into your message. That is it. We will see y'all later.